Chinua Achebe's novel, Things Fall Apart, explores the complexities of Igbo society in the late 19th century Nigeria. Through Okonkwo's story, the novel delves into themes of masculinity, power dynamics, and cultural heritage, highlighting the tension between traditional values and colonialism. The novel showcases the resilience of the Igbo community and the importance of respecting indigenous cultures. On the heels of the just concluded Things Fall Apart festival, what are the takeaways and lessons? Is there an opportunity to steward Achebe's legacy to a new generation of Igbo sons and daughters, both at home and in diaspora? This is the Eastern Eye. I am Alex Obodo. Welcome to the Eastern Eye, a program that aims to raise the political, social, and economic developments around us. Joining me tonight is Agbeze Ireke Kalu Onuma. He's a storyteller, cultural curator, writer, public speaker, and strategic consultant. Thank you so much, Chief Onuma, for joining me tonight on the Eastern Eye.
Alex, good evening, and thank you for having me once again.
All right. So, the first question will be, what will be the significance of the anniversary of Things Fall Apart, celebrating Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, and how did the festival that you were there, you have written quite copiously about some of the themes that were presented there. How do you think that it has depicted Things Fall Apart to the present generation?
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you for having me once again. I would simply tell you a story, and the story is quite simple. Arguably, it's over 5,000 years, and we are still reading the story, the Greek mythologies, and that was the way the Greeks preserved their history, preserved their spirituality, and preserved their culture. And what best could represent the Greek mythology and the Greek history than Homer's stories? That is in the same light that we see Things Fall Apart. Things Fall Apart is a very small yet complete book about our history, about our people, about the pre-colonial days, and about our encounter with colonialism, with the white man, and with their civilization. So why Things Fall Apart still remains germane, still remains important, not just for our history, but for our understanding of who the Igbos are. It is quite important that we continue to pass it from one generation to another. Like one of the papers that was delivered, which I had made commentaries on by William Wokoye.
That's right.
Towards the end of his presentation, he did say, Achebe buried in Things Fall Apart a whole lot that it would take several generations to be able to unravel. And I quite agree with him. Each time you read Things Fall Apart again, you read it with a fresh eye, you read it with a fresh understanding, and you come to see something you've never seen before. That is the timelessness of Things Fall Apart. Thank you.
So, talk to us about how Things Fall Apart has managed to remain relevant. Even this is 67th anniversary of Things Fall Apart. And do you think that the 1 week long or the week-long event or festival that we witnessed was actually able to portray that? And if you look at the age bracket of people who were very enthusiastic at those events, they were young, many of them are under 30. Is this an indication that, well, maybe we are onto something?
Yes, I agree with you. We are onto something. We've always been onto something with Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. I did say it is a timeless book. And I add to you that what makes Things Fall Apart unique is its simplicity. I'll tell you that there are not so many books out there that you will encounter that tells its story and yet packs its wisdom into so a compact way that while you read it, you flow with it, you understand, you become not just the characters and the protagonist, you become the storyteller. You begin to see areas that reflect you as an Igbo person or as an African. Because until we begin to understand that we owe this book, he spoke about us. He was not speaking about characterizations of people, of things, of animals, of systems and spiritualities. He was just speaking about the everyday person in an Igbo society that a white man came and encountered. And about the age bracket that you talked about, they were quite younger. You are talking about 30. I saw young children, 10, 11, 12, and in the workshops that they were running in the mornings, which I found myself sitting and listening to them, they were school children who were so enthusiastic about learning about those musical instruments that were characterized in Things Fall Apart. And that was mind-blowing. And the way the stories began to unfold in the scenery that was recaptured about Umofia and all that, it was something else. Now, we would be able to take it forward. Yes, there's nothing left for us to do than having taken this as our own, we are now going to project it, not just to the world, because the world has owed it. I told the story during the festival when I was making a random comment. When I arrived in Soviet Union in 1987, I arrived with no knowledge about what Soviet Union was all about, outside knowing my geography, that it was somewhere up there in the north. When I arrived, I had no jack about Russian language. We were taught Russian language from beginning. We had to spend 8 months learning Russian language. But I'll shock you. One of the things that we were being taught with was a translated copy of Things Fall Apart in Russian language. And the thing about Things Fall Apart is that the Igbos do not have a monopoly of the work anymore. It has now become a world heritage. Almost every single language that it has been translated to takes it, begins to study it, but there's no better person to understand what Achebe was saying, what he buried there in his idioms, in his parables, in the twist and in the sauciness of how he presented the tales and the parables. Even when he was talking about tragic incidents, he presented it in such a way that you begin to love tragedy. That takes me back to the ancient Greeks. When you look at how they wrote their tragedies and how they presented their tragedies, you get enamored. You just fall in love with it. And that's what Achebe has done. And that's why the age bracket is not just getting younger that are getting themselves involved in this. It's becoming a little bit of an epidemic. And I love that kind of epidemic.
All right. Let me take you back to Friday, when last Friday, when Ujuako Akukwe Nwakalo presented Nkata Umibe for the July 2025 edition. Her topic is Onoka, When Stories Are Lost, reimagining our stories, whatever it is, our history. You also did some kind of analysis of our presentation. Help us put it in perspective, especially from that point, Onoka, Things Fall Apart, When Stories Are Lost, reimagining Igbo through cultural memory. And when you situate it with what you witnessed in Things Fall Apart, it's just help us put it in perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a very good question. The moment you talk Things Fall Apart, everybody says Okonkwo. That's what jumps out at you. And it's nothing bad about it. But what she did in that paper was to show us the other side of the story, was to create a balance, was to bring out the other characters that Achebe as well buried in that. Before her paper, a few days before her paper, was William Okoye's paper. But I will end up tying them together, but let's deal with the one you asked me. What blew my mind was the way she spoke about Onoka. Nobody, I believe if there are 1,000 people listening to me now who've read that book, Unoka was just a nobody in the characterizations. But Unoka actually is one of the key things that Achebe introduced into that work that makes and creates a balance. First, Unoka is presented as a very lazy man who could not plant yams, who could not harvest yams, who does not have big bands of yam. Well, that is if what the beautiful thing is that she brought Unoka home. He said to us, if you compare Unoka with the traits of a farmer, you're going to miss the point. And missing the point is what we've been doing all along. And she said, Unoka is a dinka. In other words, she's a creative mind. And creative minds, if you go back to history, in the Middle Ages, they call them bards. In other words, they create music, they sing music, they recall, they are actually the repository of histories. And look at the beginning of the book, when we talked about the wrestling match and how the wrestler who had never been beaten before, Amalin said the cat. But what happened? It was when the flute, it was when the music floating from Unoka's flute got to Okonkwo that something mystical happened. So what am I talking about? It is that balance in that story, the way Unoka was brought in, but we have always misread it and misinterpreted it. That blew my mind in that paper. And what am I trying to say? Look at every Igbo setting. There is a place for Dinta, Dinka, Dimpa, and all sorts of people. You have a place in the society. And when your time comes, the society looks up to you to deliver. So when we judge and say Unoka was a failure without understanding the fact that music was all that he was created for, it is like asking Unoka to go and head UBA. Of course he can't do it. But an Unoka can do whatever our young artists are doing today. If Unoka was living in today's world, he's following on Instagram and he's following in almost all the social media would be mind-blowing. And that is the symptom, and that is the secret. That's what Obianuju was able to bring out.
That's an interesting take there. And so typically Achebe was situating the soft power aspect of Igbo culture and tradition. I mean, not everyone can project power, but some people can offer their own contributions to the society through their different skills. So soft power is there right from the onset.
Yes, if you look at it, that's one way of saying that. But look at the other part of it. There's Obierika, and there's the priestess that is a bundle of wisdom. It wasn't more about of Achebe saying that she was doing all these razzmatazz that all sorts of phony native doctors come out to do. She was just a woman endowed with several years of wisdom that keeps passing on from generation to generation. So the point I am trying to make is that, yes, he was being symbolized as a soft power. However, it isn't the way we have always read it.
Yeah.
And that is what that paper did when Obianuju presented that paper. She was able to expose the fact that you would have the strong men and you would have the soft men. You will have the wise men and you will have the men that creates balance. But let me shock you again what came out of all this. Is that when Unoka died, they threw him away in where we call symbolically and mythologically, we say it is a Jofia. In other words, you are thrown away there. But look at it. Okonkwo despised the father. Okonkwo despised what he represented. Okonkwo even despised the manner of his death. But where did Okonkwo end up? He died by suicide, and he ended up in the same Ajofia. Because if you die in Igbo land then by suicide, you are not buried. You are no more an Amadi. You are no more the great man. You end up there. And however Okonkwo wants to despise the father, the balance still stays there. Both of them ended up in the same place. So this whole festival was an opportunity for us to look at Achebe again, look at things fall apart with a fresh eye and with a fresh understanding. What is he exactly trying to say about us? And that, for me, is the beauty of what has happened over the past week.
Now, is it possible, before we go to Muliwo Cooyer's presentation, is it possible that a lot of people's understanding of things fall apart was just based on what the examiners asked them to offer? Because some people who read the book were reading it because it was offered to them as a literature text, not because they were reading it to enrich them. I mean, with all due respect to people who read for that purpose, but quite a chunk of youngsters who read things fall apart were reading to pass exams. So, and usually the character of Unoka was vilified all the time, and the character of Okonkwo was exalted for projecting power. Do you think that this was a consequence of, all right, reading the novel through the path of you reading it to pass an exam and not reading it with that mind of critical thinking?
Well, there are books that outlive the authors. There are books that outlives every generation. Things Fall Apart is that kind of book. So you're right in what you've just said. However, it is always important to read for the sake of enjoying what you are reading. That is what James says in his presentation about the poetry of Things Fall Apart, the very first paper that was presented. I was not there, but he shared it with me and I've read it. And I'm working on trying to untie what he was saying. But one thing struck me. He did say, if you read and you are not enjoying what you're reading, I'm paraphrasing it, then you're wasting your time. That is exactly what I want to say about Things Fall Apart. If you've read Things Fall Apart for the purposes of seeing the decay in Okonkwo, or seeing the white man doing his thing, or taking an episode, then you are reading it wrongly. You just need to read Things Fall Apart with no presumption or preconceived idea about what is being said or what is not being said. Just read it for reading's sake. That's a starting point. And that is the whole thing that this whole exercise brought out for me. That people were eager, people were hungry. Even old men and women who sat there, whom I engaged in conversation, sincerely they confess that they've never read Things Fall Apart. But they've heard so much about it. They've seen a little bit of clip about Ebubedike acting Things Fall Apart, and they were in love with it. And that is why Achebe'S, that I represented fully and came to engage for, did give out some token of 30 books so that people can just go home and read it again. But that's just a scratch. And we have to do more so that people can engage with this history, engage with this story, engage with this literature, and above all, engage with this cultural expose about who the Igbos are.
All right, thank you so much. Let's take a look at the major concern raised by Muliwo Cooyer regarding the Hollywood adaptation of Chinua Achebe's novel, Things Fall Apart. So talk to us about your observations about his presentation.
His presentation is spot on. His presentation was, for me, more like a wake-up call. It was, you see, we have come to such a point in our history where we need to begin to take back what is our own. In the same book we are discussing, if you allow the story of the hunting to be told only by the hunters, you remember that phrase, and everybody quotes it. We share it on social media. You know how that story will go. And that has been the problem. My take is simple, and my summary of Nwokoye's brilliant paper is simple. Nollywood, Igbo cultural enthusiasts, Igbo critical stakeholders, the entrepreneurs should come together and re-engage with our culture generally. With Things Fall Apart specifically, I can't fault the Achebe family if they've given the right for that to be characterized and shot with Idris Alba being touted as the person going to act Okonkwo. I can't wait to see what he does that Ebubedike didn't do. I can't wait to see what he would do that some of our upcoming and uprising great artists and actors in Nollywood and across Igbo land cannot do. So the point I'm making is that because there's been a vacuum for a long time, nobody took that up. And I know that there are so many organizations, so many foundations that are floating everywhere, announcing we are this foundation or that foundation, but none is rooted in Igbo land. Trust me, to find 100 million naira to re-engage with Things Fall Apart and characterize this in a movie is not too much, and it's not a difficult thing to do. But we've not gotten our act together. We are busy funding universities outside, endowing all sorts of things in strange places, but our own, we can't take ownership of it. So for me, this is a time to call, a call to our entrepreneurs, a call to our wealthy men, a call to our people. It's not something you can go alone. It's time to pull resources together and begin to re-engage with our culture. We are talking about Things Fall Apart. We are talking about Achebe. But there are so many of them out there. We are not talking about Cyprian Ekwensi. He wrote cleverly and severally. We are not talking about Buchie Mecheta. And if you come to our contemporary, we talk about Adichie, but there are so many of them today engaging and writing, and all of them are writing about culture and our society. It's time our entrepreneurs come back and take back what belongs to us and see how far we can salvage it.
Well, let's see if we can dip deeper into William Nwokoye's take on this. How he help us situate his argument that Achebe's narrative might be flattened in a film adaptation, and what specific elements did he identify maybe as being at risk of being lost if perhaps another Things Fall Apart adaptation comes up?
Well, first, his argument is really not the thrust of his argument that really resonated with me. Wasn't at the level of the actors. It was at the level of the scripting. Okay. You see, Achebe buried a whole lot of things about our cosmology, about our culture, about our ethos, about who we are in that book. How are you going to expect a non-Igbo reading that book to interpret our Ofo and Ogu, to interpret our Ama and all the things that he buried there? That is the fear that Nwokoye flagged. And he did mention that even at the level of interaction and consultation, we should be brought in. We, meaning the Igbos, we have a whole lot of people that have done extremely very well for themselves in that system. The lady you talked about, Obianuju, who delivered that brilliant paper, is a kind of president of the African something of film actors or something. She's in the system, and there are several of them that you can bring in as consultants so that you'll be able to understand and interpret what Achebe is doing in consonance with the realities of the Igbo cosmology. And that is what I think Nwokoye was trying to bring out. And several others. Like you said, you read the paper. We will not go on analyzing the paper in full, but the point I'm trying to make, or the point he did try to make, is that let us be conscious of the fact that this story, this parable, this history, this cosmology, and this whole representation of the Igbos may be lost if we are not part, we are not embedded in the planning and the scripting, the acting, will just be something else. May not be things fall apart.
All right, let's talk about the theme of this year's celebration. Of course, it's already done and dusted, but retrospectively now, the theme, masculine, feminine, human, the dialogue of complements. What's your own take on this?
Beautiful. I sat through the dialogue the women had and all that, and listening to them. Even though I had an issue that the anchor was not asking the questions based on the characterizations or the storyline or narratives of things fall apart. But they did try to make a point. But I'll just make it very succinct because I believe you have other questions. Now, look at Ekwefi and look at Obiorika's daughter. I think Achebe was not writing a story about a masculine world or a world dominated by men. All those men, in spite of what they think they are or what they become, first and foremost, when push comes to shove, goes to consult a priestess who is a woman. That's your first balance. And when Okonkwo comes into his Obi and rowers, everybody runs away like a rat into their holes. Again, one woman was able to stand up. So, if you look at the subtlety of how Achebe tried to create those balance, you would understand that at no time was the Igbo society created to be masculine. And another thing you remember, when Okonkwo committed abomination, na Benia, where did he go to? Ojeli Benia. He went to the mother's place. So there's always this subtle balance across Igbo society, which is very pronounced in so many places. We have Ikunne in almost every Igbo society. And we have Umonna. And then we have in the middle inserted the Umuada, who when push comes to shove, they are always the ones to bring back the balance. And at the end of the day, that is the subtlety of the team, and that is what all through the 1 week was tried to be brought out. And it was brought out very beautifully in poems, in acts, in presentations, in debates, and in conversations. And you anchored the grand finale. And at the grand finale, when Adichie presented her paper, you saw the trust. And you saw that at no time had it been or has it been a masculine society in Igbo land. It's always a balance. And that balance is what has kept us.
All right, on that note of balance, we'll take a break. When we return, I have more questions for my guest, Chief Kalu Onuma. Stay with us here on the Eastern Eye. You're welcome back to the Eastern Eye here on Afia TV. It's a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. My guest is still Chief Kalu Onuma. He's a storyteller, cultural curator, writer, public speaker, and strategic consultant. Thank you so much for staying with us. And then let's talk about this 67th anniversary that's just been concluded of the Things Fall Apart, looking at the theme, activities, engagement, and what do you think that says about the enduring legacy of Achebe'S work?
Well, before I speak about that legacy, I have to thank and congratulate James Eze and his team, Center for Memories, and all the people that worked to put that together. I'll tell you, it's a very onerous task. Outside sourcing for funds and outside coordinating and making things run seamlessly. It is a very difficult challenge. Secondly, when I arrived at the venue and walked into the recreated Umuofia village, it was mind-blowing. Yes, there is room for improvement, but what they try to do is something brave. Interpreting Achebe, using his book, and putting together what we all saw. You were there, you saw the recreation of the Ajofia, you saw the recreation of the Obi, you saw the goats, you saw the
I was enjoying the Umuofia delicacy when you met me.
Yes, yes, I saw you sitting and eating Ekwefi's food, and you did very well. You still have to tell us what you got out of it. And then the brave Umuofia soldiers that would welcome you when you come in. All these recreations weren't just spontaneous. It's something that they sat, they thought through, and somebody had to pull those words out and bring it to reality. That's beautiful. Now, the consequences of what has happened in the past 1 week, celebrating the 67th, puts us in a very strong position to continue this legacy. In 3 years' time, it will be 17 years. And if God keeps all of us alive, I hope to see a celebration that will be anchored with technology, with the going trend, that will bring in people from all over the world. It doesn't really matter where you are. I want to see an Olympic-style celebration where you don't need to fly to Enugu or fly to Igbo land for you to hook in and be part of the celebration. 17 years ago, this is a place I think I have to bring that in. When we celebrated 50 years of Things Fall Apart, the whole world was celebrating it. The icon himself was still alive. Ugonabo Achebe was still alive. And it was a challenge to allow the world celebrate Achebe, and we in Igbo land did nothing. People like Professor Nwala, Monsignor Okere, Monsignor Ireke, and several others, Pascal Dozier of blessed memory, Okuro Hasolok of blessed memory, Ndubisi Kanu of blessed memory, and Asagba of Asaba of blessed memory, Obi of Ogwashuku of blessed memory. Several of them came together, funded it, and we had a celebration, not 1 week, but a couple of months, from November 2008 to January 2009. And it went across all the 7 Ohanese states. Each state hosted something, and we were able to pull that off. But the grand finale, which is the beauty of the whole thing, we were able to put together the ability to fly Achebe back to Nigeria. I think that was my proudest moment as an Igbo man, that we were able to celebrate this icon, bring him home to deliver the Ahajioku lecture in Owerri. Of all the things I think about Ikedio Hakim, he was the governor there. I give him credit, and I always will give him credit for the way he stepped in and ensured that that happened, even when we were having challenges. So everybody played his own role. 17 years after, James Eze and his team has elevated it a little bit more. Even though they narrowed it into a space, but that space became global, in the sense that over the past 7 days, if there was a camera watching and monitoring the ins and outs into that Umuofia village, you will know that what they were able to achieve was tremendous. So what am I saying? Things Fall Apart has come to become a part of our conscious cultural narrative. And we need to do everything we can to elevate it, so that we don't leave James Caesar and his tiny team again to struggle on how to put it together. It should now become something that the Igbo across our 7 Ohanese states must take ownership. When we take ownership, I think 3 years is a whole lot of time to plan. 70 years of things fall apart will be mind-blowing. So I look forward to that. I'm not looking that it's going to be anything less than what we've done already. It's going to be something far better than that. And probably, most probably, that movie we were talking about, generated, written, acted, produced, funded by Igbo, will possibly premiere on that day.
I mean, that's a very brilliant foresight. And if you like, you say it's a prophecy. And well, it looks like this is a proposal on the table. And the question is, will it be 2027? It is. We'll find out if it happens. So, but let's take a look at, when we look at what is happening in Igbo land now and how in Things Fall Apart, the sacredness of human life was upheld. If you look at the Umuofia setting, if you killed someone, there was a stiff penalty. When Okonkwo, though accidentally killed one of his kinsmen, he was punished. He was banished from his village for 7 years. And his house was burnt. I mean, when you look at, if you listen to Chimamanda's speech, looking at her presentation, she talked about how it has become a simple thing to find lives being just wasted in Igbo land without consequence. Nobody's raising a voice. Is this the time for our voices to come together and form a roar strong enough to shut down what has become a cankerworm eating up the land? Chimamanda's keynote covered a very touching aspect of what's been bothering us in the Southeast currently, and that's the wanton spilling of blood by people who are also among us. So, situating that with what obtained in Umuofia back in the days, human life was very sacred, and there were stiff penalties for those who dared to spill the blood of a fellow human being in this part of the world. Is it time for us to combine our voices to form a very deterrent roar that is strong enough to reverberate along the length and breadth of the Southeast and Igbo?
Well, it's long overdue. That's number one. And going back to Things Fall Apart as our platform for this conversation, you realize that the very moment Achebe shed the blood of Ikemefuna, it started going downward for him. That was the beginning of the end. What does that say about our communities and about our society? It does say that a shedding of blood is not just prohibited, it comes with consequences. And the consequences, which we are seeing across Igbo land today, is the consequences not just of the shedding of blood, but of our inability to rise up and condemn it. These men and women, let us not speak about those who come from outside, but those who live amongst us, who do these things. We know them, they live in our communities. Why must we condone them? Even though Okonkwo was very close to Obierika sounded that note of warning that it should have nothing to do with the death of that young man. Isn't that prescient that when he disobeyed, it was impossible for him to put back the genie in the bottle? Igbo land must wake up. the first platform for any development, irrespective of what you want to build, security is number one. The sanctity of human life. On the Dendokana Balako, not those who are dead. So I agree with Chimamanda's presentation. I agree with that call. And we've been saying that across many and several platforms, that it is high time we stand up, one step at a time. There's nothing like a global vision. Start small in your community. I am from Abreba. Each one of us come from a native place. Let us all take charge from where we come from. When peace comes back, there's no limit to what an Igbo man can do. That, I think, is the way we should go.
And another point she raised is also in really preserving our language. She gave an example with some countries who have managed to preserve their language. I mean, we can, from the top of our heads, talk about countries who are holding fast to their language. China is a very strong example about that. You can't go to China, they're speaking English to you. That's not going to happen. Something special must be happening for them to start speaking English from the onset. So to find an Igbo man saying, Achebe'S, for instance, is that something they define? Is this how we're going to transfer our culture, our heritage, and everything that will represent us Igbo people? To go into the world in the years to come to actually say Nafabundi Igbo?
Well, thank you for this question. I really do not break my head a lot about this conversation about Igbo language. I probably might be in the minority that Igbo language is going nowhere. I'll explain. On Thursday, on the Thursday event, or the Friday one, I can't remember which one, I was asked to intervene and make a statement. And a couple of people were shouting from the audience that I should speak in Igbo. I obliged them. And I would oblige you for a few seconds. Abu moya breba. Armasu ebreba. Ebreba ba Igbo. Ebreba rasu okwu Igbo. If I deji akpari oka ebreba bụ okwu ebreba, anya ga-asụ mmakụ. Anyị da-akpa ife da n'obu. Now, Alex, this little dramatization that I've done for you, if I ask you, you will say I'm speaking Greek. But I am speaking an Igbo language.
But I understood you clearly.
You understood a bit, but several will be lost. And I believe that because of where you are from, if you meet those who are native to you, so the challenge that and the conflict we've been having is that when we say speak Igbo in a gathering of 10 Igbo men, ofubo onye Asaba, ofubo onye Ogbaru, ofubo onye Abreba, nke ọzọ bụ Aruchukwu, nke ọzọ bụ onye Ikwere, nke ọzọ bụ onye Wawa, nke ọzọ bụ onye Nsụka, nke ọzọ bụ onye Uburu. Asisubu Igbo. You know there is already a dichotomy. You are expecting that person to speak a kind of agreed Igbo. However, that's where the problem comes. He may not know that agreed Igbo, but if you ask him to speak in Igbo, he will speak. If you ask him to speak in Nsukka, he will. If you ask him to speak Wawa, he will. And we need to begin to find a way to encourage, first, be good in that one that you were born with. Kobuzia, a question of how we start marrying them together. This is a challenge, yet it is not a problem. So I am not a strong believer in that prophecy that Igbo language will die in so and so time. It's not going anywhere. As long as we have this book, Things Fall Apart, and several other masterpieces that are being produced, Igbo language will be there. So what am I encouraging? I am encouraging not so much about promotion of language, because the question would always be for me, which language am I to promote? I am very conversant in speaking the Central Igbo. I am conversant in speaking the Enugu Igbo, the Onitsha dialect, and several other dialects that I have mixed up with. I am very much at home with it. There may be just very few dialects in Igbo land that I am not conversant with. But when they speak, at least I will maintain a conversational understanding of what they are saying. That should be our goal. But what am I propagating? What we should be promoting is our core culture. What do I mean by core culture? There are basic things that an Igbo man does. Omena noji, omena n'enu nwanyi, omena n'ini mmadu, omena n'enu nwanyi. If indeed all these things are subsumed in our culture, you don't necessarily need us to promote the language for us to sustain this culture. But the moment we lose them, we have lost it. Then the Igbo identity becomes a problem. For me, our identity, language is just one component of our identity. There are several things that must come together, coalesce, to be able to form that Igbo identity. And we should not promote one and discard the other. We can't tell everybody to speak Igbo when we start desecrating the core culture that bettered each and every one of us. You realize that in Things Fall Apart, the moment Okonkwo desecrated the culture, the foundational ethos, he became a pariah. And that is a challenge before all of us.
I like the way you brought it back to Things Fall Apart. Agbeze Ireke Kalu Onuma, storyteller, cultural curator, writer, public speaker, and strategic consultant. Thank you so much for your perspectives and contributions on the Eastern Eye tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. God bless.
And that's the Eastern Eye for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Up next is Nka with Chinua Achebe. My name is Alex Obodo. Good night.